God says you were protected to hear this. Take a moment and really let that sink into your spirit. There are things that could have ended your story, situations that should have destroyed you, moments where the outcome could have gone completely wrong. Yet here you are, breathing, listening, alive. That is not coincidence. That is protection. There were dangers you never saw, battles you never knew were happening behind the scenes. God stood between you and what would have crushed you. He redirected accidents, delayed disasters, silenced plans of the enemy, and shielded you when you were unaware of the threat. Even when you were weak, distracted, or far from Him, His hand never left you. God says you are alive and still standing because He Himself has protected you. And this truth goes far deeper than what you can see on the surface. Your survival is not ordinary. It is not something to brush off as chance, timing, or personal strength. There were moments when the weight should have been too heavy, when the pressure should have crushed you, when the situation should have ended very differently. Yet somehow you endured. That endurance did not come from you alone. It came from the hand of God quietly surrounding your life. There were nights when you slept while danger passed by you. There were days when you walked forward unaware that something harmful had been stopped before it ever reached you. God does not always announce His protection. Often He works in silence. He shields without noise. He guards without applause. Many of the battles God wins for you are invisible, which is why you sometimes underestimate how deeply you are loved. You may look at your life and only notice the scars, not realizing those scars prove that something worse did not happen. Every time you recovered after being close to breaking, it was protection. Every time you escaped something that could have ruined your future, it was protection. Every time you were delayed, redirected, or denied access to something you wanted badly, it was protection wearing a disguise. God protected you when your faith was strong, and He also protected you when your faith was weak. He covered you when you prayed, and He covered you even when you forgot to pray. There were seasons when you were not thinking about God at all, yet He was thinking about you constantly. His protection is not based on your perfection. It is rooted in His purpose. There are people who were just as talented as you, just as driven as you, just as hopeful as you, who did not make it through what you survived. The difference was not intelligence or effort. The difference was the unseen hand of God resting on your life. That hand pushed danger away, softened the blow, shortened the storm, and kept your spirit intact even when your world was shaking. When the enemy tried to take you out early, God stepped in and said your time was not yet. When despair tried to convince you to give up, God strengthened you just enough to keep going. When fear tried to paralyze you, God gave you the courage to take one more step. You may call it resilience, but heaven calls it preservation. God's protection is deeply personal. It means He pays attention to details you overlook. He knows where you are vulnerable. He knows what could destroy you. He knows what you are not ready to face yet. So He stands guard over your life, not because you deserve it, but because He loves you and has assigned meaning to your existence. You were protected because your life carries weight. There is a reason you were not removed when others were. There is a reason you were lifted when you could have fallen completely. God does not invest this level of care into something without intention. Every moment you are still breathing is evidence that heaven is not finished writing your story. Even now, as you hear this message, protection is still surrounding you. God is still watching, still guiding, still shielding. The same power that carried you through what you never thought you would survive is the power that is holding you upright today. Your life is not fragile by accident. It is guarded by design. God says there were dangers you never saw, moments when trouble was closer than you realized, and outcomes that could have gone in a completely different direction. You were walking forward unaware, yet heaven was fully alert. While your eyes were focused on daily life, God's eyes were scanning every detail around you. His protection was not reactive. It was already in place before the threat even formed. There were conversations you were never invited into that could have trapped you. There were decisions you almost made that would have cost you deeply. There were places you wanted to go but somehow couldn't. Plans that fell apart at the last moment. Delays that frustrated you and changes that confused you. What felt like inconvenience was often interruption by God. He stepped in quietly, and redirected your path away from harm you were not equipped to handle. You don't always know how close danger came because God does not reveal every rescue. Some things are blocked before they are seen. Some attacks are canceled before they are launched. Some storms are weakened before they reach you. God allowed you to stay unaware so your peace would remain intact, even while He was fighting battles on your behalf. There were times when the timing didn't make sense. You left 5 minutes later than planned. You missed a call. You took a different route. You changed your mind at the last second. You may have blamed distraction or instinct, but it was divine influence guiding your steps. God can move you without alarming you. He can protect you without frightening you. He can rescue you without exposing you to fear. The unseen is where God works most powerfully. While you were living in the visible world, God was handling what you could not see. He stopped things before they gained momentum. He closed doors before the enemy could walk through them. He placed distance between you and harm so quietly that you never felt the shift. There were spiritual battles happening in realms you don't perceive. Your name was mentioned. Your future was targeted. Your calling was threatened. Yet you were kept, covered, shielded. Not because you were strong enough to fight alone, but because God chose to stand between you and destruction. Sometimes you question why certain people drifted away or why certain opportunities disappeared suddenly. God removed you from situations that would have slowly drained your faith, distorted your identity, or destroyed your peace. You didn't lose anything valuable. You were spared. God's unseen hand is gentle yet firm. It nudges, it restrains, it redirects. You may only realize what He saved you from much later, when you look back with clearer vision. Only then do you understand that had you gone further, stayed longer, or trusted that situation more, the outcome would have been painful. Even now, there are dangers you don't see, yet God is still active. He is still watching what approaches your life. He is still filtering what is allowed to come near you. You wake up thinking the day is ordinary, but heaven is fully involved in protecting every step you take. This is not meant to make you fearful. It is meant to make you grateful. You are not alone in this world. You are not unguarded. You are not walking blindly through chaos. God is present in the unseen, constantly working to keep you aligned with His purpose. Your life has been preserved through countless silent interventions. You were carried when you didn't know you needed to be carried. You were defended when you didn't know you were under attack. And you are still here today because God never stopped watching over you. God says your survival is not luck, coincidence, or random timing. It is the result of divine purpose actively working in your life. What you lived through was not chance lining up in your favor. It was intention wrapped in grace. Many people faced similar situations, but not everyone walked away. Not everyone recovered. Not everyone is still standing. The fact that you are here means your life is connected to something greater than circumstances. Luck has no memory. Purpose does. Purpose plans ahead. Purpose positions you where you need to be and removes you from where you shouldn't remain. When God preserves someone, it is because their existence is attached to an assignment that has not yet been fulfilled. Your breath is proof that heaven still expects something from your life. You may have blamed yourself for mistakes that should have ruined everything. You may have replayed moments where one wrong turn seemed enough to end your future. Yet somehow, the consequences did not consume you the way you feared. Mercy stepped in where judgment could have followed. Grace intervened where failure should have defined you. God rewrote outcomes that did not align with His plan. Purpose does not mean a life without struggle. In fact, those preserved for purpose often face deeper battles. Resistance is not a sign that you are off track. It is evidence that something valuable is being protected. When the enemy recognizes purpose, pressure increases. That pressure did not destroy you because it was never meant to. You survived because your story carries meaning. Every experience you walked through shaped you, strengthened you, and prepared you for something ahead. God does not waste pain. What tried to break you was used to build depth inside you. What could have made you bitter was allowed to refine you instead. Divine purpose is patient. It waits for the right season. It allows delays without canceling destiny. You may feel behind, but heaven is not rushed. God is never late. He preserves you through seasons that feel stagnant, so that when the right moment arrives, you are still standing to step into it. There were moments you questioned why you were spared, while others were not. That question carries weight, and it is not answered lightly. Preservation is not favoritism, it is responsibility. When God keeps someone alive, it means they are entrusted with influence, testimony, or obedience that will impact more than just themselves. Your life speaks even when you are silent. The fact that you endured gives hope to others walking through similar darkness. Your survival carries a message before your mouth ever opens. God knew that one day your presence alone would encourage someone else to keep going. Even in seasons where you felt invisible, purpose was still attached to you. Heaven never lost sight of you. God did not preserve you just for survival, but for significance. Your life is not a leftover. It is a chosen continuation. You are here because there is still work to do, still love to give, still truth to live out, still growth to experience. Divine purpose doesn't expire because of hardship. It becomes clearer through it. And the same God who preserved you until now will continue to guide every step forward. God says He preserved you because your story is not finished. What you have lived so far is not the final chapter. It is only part of a much greater narrative still unfolding. There were moments when it felt like the end, when everything in you believed there was no way forward. Yet the page did not close. Your heart kept beating. Your mind kept thinking. Your spirit kept searching. That alone is evidence that God has not concluded what He began in you. You may have felt disqualified by failure, by loss, or by seasons where nothing seemed to work. You may have convinced yourself that your best days were behind you, that opportunities had passed, or that you missed your moment. But God does not work on human timelines. He does not rush the process, and He does not abandon His plans halfway through. Preservation is proof that His intention is still active. There were times when your strength was almost gone, when continuing forward required more courage than you thought you had left. Still, you continued. That was not stubbornness or habit. It was God sustaining you. He kept your heart alive so that what He placed inside you would not be buried prematurely. When God preserves someone, it is because the outcome He has planned has not yet been revealed. Your life has meaning beyond what you have already seen. There are conversations you haven't had yet, decisions you haven't made yet, people you haven't met yet, and moments of clarity that are still ahead of you. God guards what is unfinished. He protects what is still becoming. He preserves the vessel because the purpose has not fully poured out. Even your unfinished areas matter to God. The dreams that feel delayed, the calling that feels unclear, the identity that feels in process, none of it is wasted. God is patient with growth. He allows time for maturity so that when the next chapter opens, you are ready to carry it. There were attempts to close your story early. Situations that tried to define you by one moment. Voices that tried to label you permanently. Fear that tried to convince you that nothing new could begin. Yet God stepped in and said, this narrative continues. You are more than one season. You are more than one failure. You are more than what you have survived. Preservation is not accidental. It is intentional continuation. God keeps you alive not just to remember the past, but to step into what comes next. Your life still holds potential that has not yet been seen by the world. Heaven knows what is coming, even if you do not. There is still growth ahead. Still healing ahead. Still clarity ahead. God did not protect you just to leave you stuck. He protected you so you could move forward at the right time, in the right way, with the wisdom gained from where you've been. The chapters ahead may look different than you imagined, but they are not lesser. God writes stories of redemption, restoration, and renewal more beautifully than stories without scars. What you are becoming matters as much as where you have been. You are preserved because the ending has not been written. God is still shaping your path, still guiding your steps, still calling your name. Your story continues not by accident but by divine design. God said what tried to break you only revealed the depth of His covering over your life. The pressure that came against you was not random, and the intensity of the struggle was not a sign of your weakness. It was proof that something valuable was being guarded. If there had been nothing worth protecting, the attack would not have been so fierce. Yet through it all, you remained, not untouched, but unbroken. There were moments when you bent so low you thought you would snap completely. The weight of disappointment, betrayal, loss, and fear pressed down on you from every side. You questioned how much more you could endure. Still, Somehow you rose again. That rising was not fueled by sheer willpower. It was sustained by God's covering surrounding you even when you felt exposed. Breaking is final, but bending means preservation. God allowed you to feel the struggle without letting it destroy you. He let the storm shake you so you would discover your roots were deeper than you realized. Every time you stood back up, it was evidence that God had placed strength inside you greater than what was pressing against you. What hurt you did not have permission to finish you. Pain knocked at your door, but it was not allowed to stay. The enemy came expecting collapse, but instead witnessed endurance. God used what was meant to crush your spirit to prove that His protection cannot be penetrated. There were lessons hidden inside the pain. God did not cause every wound, but He covered you while you healed from them. He stood guard over your mind when thoughts tried to overwhelm you. He protected your heart from becoming permanently hardened. Even when you felt yourself growing tired or cold, something within you refused to die. That refusal was divine. Some people would not have survived what you carried. Some would have lost themselves in bitterness or given up entirely. Yet God preserved your identity even when circumstances tried to reshape it. He kept your core intact. You came out altered but not erased, changed but not destroyed. Your faith may have shaken, but it did not collapse. Your hope may have flickered, but it was never completely extinguished. That is covering. God does not always remove the battle, but He limits how far it can go. He draws a line and says this is as much as you're allowed. When you look back, you may realize that what almost broke you actually revealed who was holding you together. Strength was revealed not in the absence of struggle, but in the ability to continue through it. God's protection is often demonstrated most clearly in moments where survival itself becomes the miracle. What was meant to end your progress ended up refining your character. What was meant to silence your voice strengthened it. What was meant to leave you empty taught you dependence on God rather than on circumstances. You are still standing not because life became gentle, but because God's covering remained firm. Your endurance is not an accident, it is evidence. Evidence that God is faithful, that His protection holds, and that nothing allowed into your life was strong enough to take you out of His hands. God says this moment is a wake-up call, not to frighten you, but to draw you closer. You were protected, preserved, and carried to this point for a reason, and now heaven is inviting you to pay attention. There are seasons where God speaks loudly through events, not just words. Survival itself becomes the message. You are here, and that alone is meant to awaken something deeper inside you. There were times when you lived on autopilot, moving through days without fully realizing how much God had already done for you. Protection was active long before you ever acknowledged it. Yet mercy does not demand gratitude before it acts. God covered you anyway. Now He is gently opening your eyes, asking you to recognize His presence and respond with awareness rather than habit. A wake-up call is not condemnation, it is an invitation. God is not reminding you of what you escaped to shame you, but to realign you. When He saves someone from unseen danger, it is often because the direction they were heading in needed adjustment. Protection becomes a signal, telling you that your life matters too much to be lived carelessly or without listening. You are being called to slow down and hear His voice clearly, not just in crisis, but in daily life. God wants your attention before decisions are made, not only after consequences appear. He wants relationship, not emergency contact. This preservation is meant to move you from distance into closeness. There are patterns God wants to change, habits He wants to refine, distractions He wants you to release. He protected you, but He does not want you to repeat what almost cost you. A wake-up call invites wisdom. It calls for reflection and intentional living. God is saying now is the time to respond, to pray with sincerity, to listen with humility, to walk with obedience. Delay is dangerous not because God will abandon you, but because ignoring mercy can numb your sensitivity to His leading. He wants you alert, not afraid, engaged, not distant. Your life is too valuable to drift, too protected to be careless, too meaningful to be lived without direction. This is not about perfection, but about alignment, about choosing awareness over comfort and growth over routine. You were shielded so you could hear Him clearly now, not later, not someday, now. The grace that carried you this far is inviting you to walk intentionally forward, guided rather than wandering. God's wake-up calls always come with patience. He speaks, waits, and calls again. But each invitation carries responsibility. You are being asked to respond with trust and willingness, knowing the same God who protected you will also guide you step by step as you move ahead. God says His protection over your life is not distant or general. It is deeply personal and intentional. You are not just one face in a crowd that heaven watches from far away. You are known. You are seen. Your name is spoken in places you cannot hear. The care that has surrounded you has been deliberate, detailed, and filled with love that goes beyond human understanding. There were moments when you felt unnoticed, when people overlooked your effort and misunderstood your heart. Yet even in those quiet seasons, God was paying close attention. He saw every tear you hid, every prayer you whispered under your breath, every silent battle you fought alone. Protection flowed not because you asked perfectly, but because God loves personally. God's protection proves that you matter to Him as an individual. He did not shield you randomly. He shielded you because your life holds value in His eyes. Love is not passive. Love guards. Love intervenes. Love stands watch when no one else does. And God's love has been standing watch over you through every season. You may have questioned whether God truly cared during times of pain or delay, but protection often operates quietly, without explaining itself in the moment. Only later do you realize how many times harm was redirected and destruction was prevented. Love was working long before understanding arrived. God knew the things that would hurt you most, and He positioned His protection accordingly. He preserved your mind when stress tried to overwhelm you. He preserved your heart when disappointment threatened to harden it. He preserved your spirit when exhaustion whispered that giving up would be easier. This is not the work of a distant God, but of a loving Father closely involved in your journey. Love does not always remove hardship, but it limits damage. God allowed you to feel pain without letting pain become your identity. He allowed challenges without allowing them to define your worth. What you endured did not strip you of who you are, because love covered you in the middle of it. You were protected not only from external threats, but from becoming someone you were never meant to be. God guarded your character. He prevented bitterness from settling permanently in your soul. He kept your heart capable of compassion even after hurt. That is deep protection motivated by love. When God protects you personally, it means He has plans that include joy, growth, and fulfillment beyond survival. His love sees potential even when you feel depleted. It sees future where you see fatigue. It sees purpose where you see confusion. The care you received was not loud, but it was constant. It followed you through seasons of doubt and times of strength alike. God's love did not fluctuate based on your performance. It remained steady, firm, and committed. You are still here because you are loved intentionally, not generally, not occasionally, personally. And that love continues to surround you, guiding your steps and guarding your life every single day. God says you were protected so you could receive this message today. This moment is not random, and your presence here is not accidental. Out of all the moments in your life, this one has been carefully aligned so that you could hear, understand, and receive what heaven wants to speak into your spirit right now. Protection did not stop in the past, it carried you forward into this very second. There were paths you could have taken that would have led you far away from this moment, decisions that almost redirected your life permanently, circumstances that threatened to silence your faith or exhaust your hope. Yet God guarded your steps, not only to spare you from danger, but to preserve your ability to hear Him clearly today. This message arrives at a time when your heart is ready in ways it may not have been before. Pain has softened you. Experience has deepened you. What once might have been ignored is now felt. God protected you long enough for understanding to mature, and for your spirit to recognize His voice. You were not just preserved to survive, but to listen, to receive correction without feeling rejected, to receive direction without fear, to recognize that God's voice is not distant or harsh, but present and intentional. This message is an invitation, not an accusation. Everything you lived through has brought you to this awareness. Every delay, every redirection, every struggle played a role in aligning you for this moment. Protection shaped your timing. God knew exactly when you would be ready to hear truth without running from it. The fact that you are still searching, still listening, still open, is evidence that God has been protecting not just your body, but your heart. He preserved your sensitivity. He kept something alive inside you that responds to his call. This message is meant to remind you that you are seen, and that your life is not drifting aimlessly. God has been guiding your steps toward moments of clarity like this one. Moments where confusion begins to lift and purpose becomes clearer. You were protected to hear reassurance when fear was growing loud, to hear hope when discouragement was close, to hear truth when doubt was whispering lies. God timed this message to meet you exactly where you are. What you do after hearing this matters. Awareness creates responsibility. You are now invited to move forward with intention, trust, and openness. The same God who protected you to hear this will continue to walk with you as you respond. This moment does not close anything, it opens something. A deeper awareness. A renewed sense of direction. A reminder that you are not alone and never have been. You were protected so this connection could happen, and it carries meaning that will continue unfolding beyond today.